Slide 5 of our World War II unit here, the war effort at home expands. Nice short slide here for you this time, won't take too long, but we do need to cover this, so let's get started. War industries, factories and such, were mainly, although some in the South, mainly in the North, and with that came a lot of migrations to the North of people looking for work. So we'll start with African Americans migrating from the South. On the map here you see lots of arrows heading to the north, heading up north, north. Blacks from the South would go north looking for work in defense industries and factories. And as you can imagine, they're not always welcomed. Racial issues become a big deal. Race riots break out in big cities across the North, as blacks are not always welcomed there taking jobs. To help prevent discrimination, Roosevelt formed what he called the Fair Employment Practices Commission. Fair Employment Practices Commission. This was set up to make sure that discrimination was not occurring in defense industries. These Fair Employment Practices Commissioners would go around investigating factories and workplaces anywhere that had a defense contract with the federal government. If it was discovered that you were refusing to hire people because of their race or discriminating against them because of their race, the federal government could take over your factory. So if you refused to hire black workers, you ran the risk of losing your factory. The federal government would take that over and take it from you. So Roosevelt was going to do what he could to help blacks during this time. We also see a lot of migrations of Native Americans, Indians leaving the reservations, going to big cities looking for work in defense factories. So when a lot of young white men went off to fight in the war, somebody's got to fill those jobs. In a lot of cases it was women, but in some cases it was blacks or Indians as well. Speaking of the Indians, we need to take a moment here and talk about a group of Indians that joined the military. They were known as the Code Talkers. These were from the Navajo tribe. And mainly they were attached to Marine units fighting in the Pacific against the Japanese. The Navajo Code Talkers were used to relay messages from a headquarters to a unit in the field. Every unit had a Navajo Code Talker. And specifically Navajo were used because there was no written version of the Navajo language. The only people who knew Navajo were native Navajo Indians. The language wasn't written down. The only way to learn to speak it was to be taught by a Navajo Indian. So all messages were sent to Marine units in Navajo. There would be a Navajo speaker in a headquarters, and he would get on a radio and send a message to a Marine unit. There would be a Navajo Code Talker in the Marine unit who would listen and then translate it for the CO of that unit. The Code Talkers were among the most protected members of a Marine unit, because if you lost your Navajo Code Talker, you had no idea, no way to get orders for where you were supposed to go or what you were supposed to do. The Japanese would intercept messages, but they couldn't make any sense of them because no one spoke Navajo. It was a brilliant plan. It worked really well, too. Really interesting move here by the military. We also have a problem here, specifically on the West Coast, of what are called the Zoot Suit riots. Okay? A lot of Mexican Americans living on the West Coast, many of them braceros, would, on the weekends or evenings, whatever, they would get dressed up. These are Latinas, all dressed up and go into the big city, into Los Angeles, into San Diego specifically, but into the big cities of California, to have dinner, to go to the bars, to listen to music, where they would run into, inevitably, sailors, U.S. sailors on shore leave who would come to California. They would go into the bar, they would get drunk and run into the Latinos. Things didn't always go well. You get, racist drunk sailors and Mexican Americans or immigrant Mexicans, and riots would break out between them. They're called the Zoot Suit riots because this here, the gentleman that you see there, he's wearing a zoot suit. He's got the long coat with the big collar, the fancy hat, the long pocket chain there. That's called a zoot suit. Okay? And fights would break out between these Mexican immigrants and U.S. sailors. It was used by Germans and Japanese for propaganda purposes to present a portrait of a divided America. Americans fighting Americans. How can they possibly beat us? They're fighting amongst themselves. So the Zoot Suit riots don't do a lot to help the war effort here. All right, that's it for this slide.